Pastor David invited me on Tuesday to share, and so I'm kind of in a state of fragility, of not having much time to prepare, and also just a few weeks ago my mother passed, and our family's been consuming with that, as you might imagine. And I want to thank you for all your kind words of condolence and your thoughtfulness. Mother taught us how to live. She also taught us how to die. I'd just like to share with you a few insights of her last hours with us together. Mom and Dad were a pastoral couple in the Lutheran Church, and we were in 5 parishes, and each parish, except for the last one, they picked up a son. I don't know what they were doing, but we're all 4 years apart. I guess that was part of the 2-generational family plan. But I do want to share with you that her last day, it was difficult to bring her out of a deep sleep. But when she came to, there was a period of restlessness and not being settled down. It lasted for about a half an hour. And then Celia whispered into Mother's ear, "Mom, all of your sons, all your grandchildren have come around. You can go now." And it's like she found another cue. And her eyes opened and she started looking around as if she were looking in the balcony and smiling, but not focused. We were asking, "Mom, are you hearing the angels?" She didn't answer. But she looked at us and said, "I'm okay, don't worry about me." And then a few moments later, several times she said, "Come on now." It was as if she was sitting at the bus stop, waiting for the bus to come and pick her up. "Come on now." And then one of the last things that I'll never forget is she had a broad smile on her face and she said, "I don't need anything." A few hours later, she was in glory. That was her legacy of faith, and she has been a rock to our family. And it is this morning that I have chosen to talk to you about rocks and storms. And I brought a little rock from my garden, and it's heavy and black and big. Anyone know what kind of rock that is? Obsidian, a fire rock, nature's glass, formed in the bowels of the earth by a great deal of pressure and heat. It's a volcanic rock. It's smooth and it's uniform in structure. You can see the lines through it. It's nature's glass. And it is like lava, but it's cooled faster. And it comes from volcanoes. Now the only problem is, last time I checked, there are no active volcanoes in our area. Oh, there is one extinct one called Mount Tigard. That's it in the metropolitan area. So what's the story behind this misplaced rock in our garden? Well, you have to go back to 1969 in a place called East Helena Lake, where Mom and Dad took us on a vacation. And one of the activities that they wanted to do was to take a little boat out in the middle of the lake. And Mom and Dad didn't have, between the two of them, they didn't have any experience swimming. So what they were thinking about going out in the middle of this lake, as a storm kicked up and the motor started to sputter and then die right in the middle of the lake. And Dad asking this 15-year-old boy to grab an oar and try to steer the prow of the boat into the waves while he frantically tried to get the motor going. A little bit of trauma. Finally, it came back to life and they got quickly back to the other side of the lake. But as a commemoration of that event, Mom and Dad decided to take home this obsidian rock and put it in their garden. And that's the story of how it got into our yard. It reminds us that God, on that day in 1969, was merciful to all of us. That's the story of East Salina Lake. I'm struck by how rocks so often appear in the Bible. The patriarchs, they built altars with rocks to sacrifice to God, to atone sacrifices to Yahweh. Jacob used a stone for a pillow one time. God commanded Joshua to take stones out of the river Jordan as Israel crossed into the land of promise, and they built a monument so that they wouldn't forget. Jesus in his triumphal entry into Jerusalem refers to rocks as being the candidates for praising God if the Israelites were to be silenced. There was also a large stone that covered Jesus' tomb, and it was rolled away by that angel on Easter Sunday. Jesus is the rock. Can I hear an amen? Amen. Jesus is the rock. There's one stone in particular that I would have us study today, and you can get your Bibles ready, because this stone is called a stone of help. In Hebrew, it's Ebenezer. The stone of Ebenezer is a testimony of how God's help comes from most unlikely places. So, in your Bible, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 7. We'll start with verse 1, and we'll continue on to verse 12. Let me give you a little bit of a background, though, of this story. Israel, as a nation, since they had occupied the promised land, had been in this new terrain for some 200 years. This was during the period or the era of the judges, where a leader would be raised up and guide Israel, deliver them from whatever situation they happened to be in. The people would return close to the Lord. After that judge died, they would forget, they would fall back into their wayward patterns and fall away from God until their next crisis. Samuel is the last judge that Israel has before a king. And during this last era, the predecessor before him, Eli the priest, was an inept priest who had two corrupt sons who abused the practices of the faith and mishandled the use of the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is that sacred box that was used to symbolize the presence of Yahweh, the presence of God in the midst of the Israelites. In fact, that box was taken in the midst of a battle against the Philistines some 20 years before this text has been, that we count this morning, and it actually fell into enemy hands. But the presence of God was so heavy upon the Philistines that they just couldn't handle it. There were all kinds of plagues and curses that happened upon them, and they soon found a way to get it back to the Israelites. And so this Ark of the Covenant is under great controversy for the fact that people that did not respect the presence of God were soon to be held account for what they had done. And so the mishandling of that is a big factor as we read this text. Verse 1. So the men of Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. The Philistines had sent it on a cart back toward Israel. They brought it to Abinadab's house and consecrated Eleazar, his son, to guard the ark of the Lord. The ark remained in Kiriath-Jearim a long time, 20 years in all. Then all the people turned back to the Lord. So Samuel said to all the Israelites, "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourself of foreign gods and Ashereths, and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve only Him. And He will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines." So the Israelites put away their Baals and their Asherahs and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, "Assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you." When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came to attack them. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines, and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to the point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shem. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." See, at this time, Israel had tried to be playing it both ways. Once in a while, worshiping the true God, but worshiping the local deities, the gods of fertility, of Baal. And it's interesting that at that time, people would give libations of water. They would engage in other activities that we won't describe here today, but to encourage the god of fertility to rain on them. So here we have in this text that they are pouring out water before the true God, asking for a blessing. And that is a change. And so Israel is under siege. It takes place on the heels of a generation prior. Some 30,000 Israelites had died on this very battlefield when the Ark of the Covenant had fallen into the hands of the Philistines for a period of time. And in this battlefield, we see that they humbled themselves, they turned back to God, and as the enemy closes in, Samuel offers up that offering, and the Lord responds with thunder. And Samuel knew that this was a moment to mark in the communal history of the nation. To remember that the Lord has indeed been gracious. To commemorate the moment, Samuel erects a stone, anoints it, and calls it Ebenezer. It's a tangible, enduring reminder. The solid rock symbolizes God's unwavering presence, his unwavering blessings. It's called a memorial. We too, in our world today, we have memorials. They're different shapes and forms. Memorials in human history sometimes mark great power. Think of the pyramids in Egypt, or the palace in Versailles in France, where Louis XIV wanted to manifest his presence so powerful as the most supreme leader in Europe at that time, that you had to walk through a 200-foot hall of mirrors just to see him in his throne room. A projection of power. The Colosseum in Rome was another projection in power. Sometimes memorials, though, are not just a projection of power, they can be a testimonial of great suffering. And here we have one that is a two-edged sword, where the World Trade Center was a projection of economic power and might. But just this week, as Pope Francis came to observe and honor the tragedy that happened there on 9/11, it is also a memorial of great suffering and pain. So memorials also mark suffering. Gettysburg, Auschwitz, Rwanda, Cambodia, they have their memorials as testimonies of great suffering. In the far east of Russia, in a city called Magadan, some 18 years ago, I visited that on a very cold November day, out on the windswept prairies that they have before you head into the Tundra land. It's a memorial called The Mask, a 45-foot tall memorial of a face that imposed upon it on the front is a cross, right, going down the middle and across the bridge of the nose, and tears coming from it. And the teardrops were actually human beings falling out of the eyes. And on the back of the mask was a large muscular figure impaled on a cross. Not so much a testimony of the crucifixion, but it's a testimony of suffering. And here at this place was a commemoration of the millions who had passed away in the Stalinistic era of the gulags, the work camps. So memorials can be used to project power, but they also remind us of great suffering. The memorial that surpasses all, however, is the cross of Jesus Christ. Some years back, I was blessed to be in the city of Ephesus, which is now in western Turkey, and sat in the ruins of the stadium that we find in the book of Acts, where for 2 hours, people, the silversmiths, protested the work of the Apostle Paul, saying for 2 hours, shouting at the top of their lungs, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis!" And I tried to think about what that must have been like at that time, some of the other events that they had at that theater. And as my eyes peered around, I looked at one of the cliffs nearby, and on top, I saw a cross. And it reminded me of that old hymn, "In the cross of Christ I glory, towering over the wrecks of time." The cross is the true memorial, and that will guide us through our storms of life. Ken Geyer, in his book, Peace Through the Storm, talks about 2 storms that we can encounter in life. One internal, the other external. And the author promises that God will help us, if not with one storm in our life, He might help us in 2. Even as Christ suffered in Gethsemane, He had a resolute peace about Him in the midst of His storm. He had internal peace. And this is the type of peace, no matter what our storm in life might be, is one that is assured that we can have. We can have peace through the storm. Geyer writes, "The miracle of the inner variety of peace, this inexplicable, this supernatural calm in the storm, is of the greatest miracle you'll ever experience. Mother gave me a glimpse of that inner peace in the final storm of her life." This is the promise that we too can have when Jesus is our rock and when we recall His blessings. To get us to that place where we can have that inner calm, we need to recount, just like what Samuel was trying to do for the Israelites, the remembrance of God's faithfulness, the remembrance of His sure word, His Ebenezer. And that's what I would have us engage in this morning, is to take inventory of the rocks, of the Ebenezers in our life. And those can be your own family history of how God has proven Himself faithful. There's a family at West Hills Covenant Church that has a large, one of those old washing machine tubs, those metal tubs. Deborah, you remember that. just a little bit, but they have it right in front of their fireplace, and it is filled with rocks. And on each and every one of those rocks is a date or a remembrance when they can pull out of that tub, God visited us and answered a prayer. God healed so-and-so. God saved us in a car accident. God provided when there was no more work. They have their tub of rocks to remind them. And I would invite us to reflect as individuals and as families to find some way that we commemorate God's faithfulness, His goodness in our life. It might be in the form that you do a journal. It might be in the form that you have family time and you take time to recount. It might be time for those of you who are blessed to sing a song, to compose music as your Ebenezer, that God is faithful, that He is indeed true. Some of us, we're in the midst of these storms right now, and we need to lay hold of a rock. And we might have health setbacks, work, or other crises. Others of us, we've come out of the storms. Others are ready to head into one, and we're not even aware of it yet. But it's coming. Because that's just the way that life happens. And it doesn't have to be just those solid events. Remember that the Apostle Peter describes those who are faithful as living stones. And as I looked at the headstone, it was a common headstone for my mom and my dad. It commemorates a place, just as the cemetery does for all of the loved ones. But I thank God for that time, for those living stones in my life that had an influence, that set the trajectory of my life's path in a certain direction. We all have them if we'll just take time. We're too busy for the next thing, checking it off our list, going on to the next thing. But I'd like to take a few moments where we can slow down, use the back of your church bulletin, and take a little inventory just for a few moments. And Deborah, I'm going to ask you to play some music while we do that. I'm just recalling some of those Ebenezer moments in our lives. Years ago, there was a young pastor. His name was Robert Robertson. He understood the naming and the remembering of the Ebenezers in our life. And so in 1757, at the age of 22, he penned that song, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." Here I'll raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. It's a beautiful hymn. But it was somebody who had glimpsed and taken inventory of God's goodness in their life. We all have one common denominator, even though our Ebenezers might be different. And that is that God has gifted us with His goodness in His life, in our life, to serve as reminders. So, in the back of your bulletin, we want to sanctify a couple of moments right now where you can recall an event in your life where God has been good. Hasn't He? Hasn't He been good? He's been more than good. He's been so gracious. Please, take a few moments and take inventory of your Ebenezers. And no, it doesn't have to be the dramatic, big eventful time. I mentioned that Jacob, one of the patriarchs, took a stone for a pillow. And it was that night that he was given a vision of a ladder up to heaven. When he woke up that morning, morning. He said, surely the Lord was in this place and I wasn't even aware of it. Think back. You might have one of those aha moments today where you're finding or given a glimpse of being able to piece part of the puzzle together and realize, wow, I forgot about that. I didn't realize that God has been so good. Take a moment and do your inventory. This week, I would invite us to take that little inventory that we have taken or are taking and open it up in a time with your Lord and thank Him. I'd encourage you to share what your Ebenezer's are with one another in your family and with one another. This is a good season to take inventory of the Ebenezer's and to break forth with thanksgiving and praise. God is always faithful. And He sets up an Ebenezer, a memorial in our life, so that He calls us by name and He says, don't ever forget, I'm with you. My promises are sure. One of the verses on Christ the solid rock, I says, when darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every strong and stormy gale, my anchor holds deep within the veil. You can drill down to the bedrock of these Ebenezer's that God has spread before you in your life. You can count on Him. And by God's grace, you can be a living stone and an Ebenezer in someone else's life as well. Let's pray. Father God, you have graced us time and again with your goodness in our lives. Oh God, forgive us when we so often do not see beyond the veil that hides your lovely face. Oh God, grant us eyes that see as you do, with an eternal perspective, that we can recount again and again your goodness and your faithfulness. Lord, when we feel weak, may we rely on your great grace. And may these stones, whether they be events or living stones, may they cause us to be strengthened and to plod on in this journey called life. This is our prayer. This is our intent. And we declare it in the name of Jesus Christ.